If you want to hit your best tennis shots possible, then it's critical that you make contact at the right points in the power curve. This is a concept that I've been thinking about for a little while now. I think power curve is perfect for tennis because the vast majority, if not all, tennis shots are created with some kind of circular movement or motion. Some kind of rotational force is being applied from the body out through the arm into the racket and into the ball. And so there is naturally kind of a highest leverage point where if we make contact like right in the sweet spot on that curve, then we're going to apply the most force with the least amount of effort or energy. And this half of the curve right here represents early contact. So like we're building in energy, but we haven't hit our maximum efficiency, leverage, or strength point yet. And so this represents somebody who's making contact before we get to our peak strength kind of point in the curve. And then I'm going to show you an example of this in just a second. There's examples of tennis players who make contact after the optimal point in that curve. Okay, so let me show you like a practical example of this. So first, let's look at Novak here. And I want you to watch his chest, just watch his chest, and notice how between pre-contact and contact and post-contact, his chest makes a full 180-degree turn, like a full half circle. Look at his chest. It starts off facing towards the camera. Then at contact, his chest is facing forwards, almost directly towards the net. Not quite, a little bit short of facing parallel to the baseline. And then post-contact, as he's just allowing the energy to dissipate and his body and his racket to decelerate, he continues at a full additional 90 degrees, using rough angles here. But it's roughly about a full half circle. And so in my mind, that contact point has got to be, like, assuming Novak is pretty good at swinging a tennis racket and he's pretty good at being an athlete and utilizing his body and his kinetic chain efficiently, let's just go ahead and assume that the ballpark like sweet spot on this power curve on a forehand in neutral position and good balance is somewhere right about facing forwards. Now in my experience, and by the way, I really truly believe that this concept applies to all tennis shots. Serves, one-handed backhands, two-handed backhands, slices, volleys, overheads. There's some kind of rotational energy. It might not be 180 degrees and it might not be forward facing is the sweet spot in the curve, but there's some variation or example of that curve taking place. And there's an optimal like contact point where we're using our body most efficiently and most effectively to hit the best shot with the least amount of effort or energy. Most tennis players on big long swings, like a forehand, are on this part of the curve. They're in some degree, form, or fashion. Some tennis players are all the way here. Like their body has just moved like a few degrees and then their arm goes through and hits the ball mostly with arm effort. And they're not even close to the optimal part. It's rare. So most of the time, tennis players are on this side of the curve. But occasionally, this is what tennis coaches, or maybe in videos you've heard referred to as over-rotation. Let me show you an example of that. It's rare in my experience, but here's a tennis player that I just worked with a couple days ago who is actually on the right side of the power curve on his forehand. He is starting off not quite 90 degrees, and so his chest is not ever quite facing towards the camera. And as he starts to swing forwards, you'll notice that his chest hits that forward-facing position well before he actually makes contact. So what does that mean? His chest, because he's making a circular swing and because he's got all this rotational force and energy going around towards contact, his body's not going to just stop there. He's got energy and momentum, and so it's going to continue to turn. And so he's making contact with his chest almost in Novak's finishing position, which he arrived at well after he hit the ball. And that's the position my student here is hitting the ball from. So he's all the way over somewhere, on this end of the curve, and he can swing hard, he can swing fast, he can get better and faster at putting more intensity and energy into his swing. But as long as he's hanging out on this side of the curve and he's not in an optimal position with the release and the rotation of his body, he's never really going to get the best result possible out of his forehand. So let me show you after some work. And by the way, it's just as much work to go from this end of the curve to the center as it is to go from this end of the curve to the center. It seems like on the surface, like, oh, well, he's already rotating, like, well, just too much of a good thing. So it can't be that hard to just wait a little bit longer, right? But here's the thing, habits are habits. So whether you tend to be always late or you tend to be always early, it still takes a tremendous amount of effort consciously to make the change to the proper spot. So here's him after some work. I'm not going to get into the drills and practice progressions right now, but it took him a good chunk. I don't know, we probably worked on this for about an hour or so. And eventually we did get him successfully to start hitting the ball. And by the way, he came to me with the symptom of, Ian, I just can't hit the ball above waist height. And certainly not shoulder height, and certainly not chest height or shoulder height. I have no ability to hit the ball higher. And it's because it's just a symptom of how over-rotated he was and how far past the center of his power curve he was. And so his sweet spot, naturally for him was very, very low because that's where he felt like he had some leverage. So A, kinetic chain and use of the big parts of the body is almost always the answer. We got him making contact up at chest height without working on making contact at chest height. But I'm kind of getting off on a tangent. The big thing here I wanted to focus on today was simply making sure that you hit the right positions pre-contact and contact so that we hit the meat of that power curve. And now he's finishing his swing in a body position where he was touching the ball and making contact before. So recalibrating his timing, bringing his contact zone back into the sweet spot of his power curve, he started hitting stronger shots with less effort. Also takes a lot of effort, like mentally, cognitively, to be able to do this. Over time, he's going to be able to release much more effort with a lot less, much more energy with a lot less effort. Hopefully this idea is helpful for you. I really think it applies to just about all of tennis. Something I've been thinking about. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.